I straightened my simple black dress, feeling distinctly out of place amid the crystal glasses and fine china that adorned my parents' dining table. Another lavish family dinner where I'd be reminded exactly where I stood in the hierarchy of success. "Emma dear, pass the salt." My mother's voice carried that familiar note of disappointment she'd perfected over the years. The same tone she used when telling her friends that her only daughter was still just a secretary. My brother Michael sat across from me, his custom Italian suit practically gleaming under the chandelier light. Next to him, his wife Sophia adjusted her diamond necklace while their perfect children sat quietly, already trained in the art of family superiority. "So Michael," Dad began, his chest puffing with pride, "tell us about this merger you're working on. Biggest deal of the year, isn't it?" Michael's smile widened. "GlobalTech and Harrison Industries. $2 billion deal, Dad. The papers are being signed tomorrow morning." He took a slow sip of his wine, savoring not just the taste but the moment. "Of course, being chief financial officer means I'm handling all the major negotiations." "That's wonderful, darling." Mom beamed. "And Peter?" He turned to my other brother. "How's the legal department treating you?" Peter straightened his tie. "Made senior partner last month. Youngest in the firm's history." I quietly ate my salad, trying to make myself invisible. But of course that never worked in this family. "And Emma?" Mom's attention suddenly landed on me like a spotlight. "Still working as a secretary, dear?" Before I could answer, Michael let out a laugh that felt like a slap. "She's not just any secretary, Mom. She's an executive assistant." His voice dripped with mockery. "To some consulting firm nobody's ever heard of. Phoenix Consulting Group," I said quietly, but nobody seemed to hear. "She's just a secretary," Michael continued, talking about me as if I wasn't there. "While we're all executives. But hey, someone has to make the coffee, right?" Laughter rippled around the table. Even the children smirked, already learning that Aunt Emma was the family joke. I started to speak, but Peter cut me off. "Hey, maybe you can apply at Harrison Industries after the merger. I hear they have great benefits for support staff. Though." He paused, examining me with faux concern. "You might want to upgrade your wardrobe first. That dress looks like it came from a department store." It was a $3,000 Alexander McQueen I'd bought myself after closing my first major deal, but I didn't bother correcting him. Let them think what they wanted. "I'm doing fine where I am," I said simply. "Oh honey," Mom reached across to pat my hand. "You don't have to pretend with us. We know times must be tough. Maybe if you'd finished your MBA instead of dropping out." "I did finish it," I said. "Night classes. 3 years ago." Michael nearly choked on his wine. "Wait, you got an MBA? But it's not like you need one to schedule meetings and order lunch." I thought about my office on the top floor of the Phoenix building. About the teams of analysts who reported to me, the billion-dollar deals I'd orchestrated, the companies I'd transformed. About how tomorrow morning, my signature would be the only one that mattered on the GlobalTech merger papers. But instead of speaking, I just smiled and asked Mom to pass the potatoes. "Well," Dad cleared his throat, clearly ready to move on to more important matters. "Michael, tell us more about tomorrow's meeting. This merger will make the family proud." As Michael launched into another self-congratulatory speech about his role in the deal, I checked my phone under the table. A message from my assistant glowed on the screen. "Everything's set for tomorrow's 9 a.m. meeting. The Harrison Industries team is nervous about the last-minute changes you requested. Should I tell them it's non-negotiable?" I typed a quick yes, and slipped the phone back into my pocket, hiding my smile behind my wine glass. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. "I just hope you're not late to your little secretary job because of all this family dinner wine," Michael smirked, noticing my drink. "Those coffee runs are pretty important." If he only knew I owned the building where he was signing the papers tomorrow. That every aspect of this merger had been orchestrated by Phoenix Consulting Group. By me. But for now I just nodded demurely. "Don't worry about me, Michael. I wouldn't miss tomorrow for anything in the world." The next morning I arrived at Phoenix Consulting Group's headquarters an hour early. The sun was just rising over the city skyline, casting long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my private elevator. I smiled, remembering Michael's sneer about coffee runs. If only he knew this entire building belonged to his little secretary sister. "Good morning, Miss Phoenix," my assistant James greeted me as I stepped into my top-floor office. Only a handful of people knew that Emma Carlton, the secretary my family mocked, was actually Emma Phoenix, founder and CEO of one of the most powerful consulting firms in the country. The Harrison Industries team arrived early, James continued. They're quite nervous about the changes you demanded to the merger terms. I nodded, setting my briefcase down on my desk. And my family? Your brother Michael is in the main conference room, trying to convince our junior associates to let him speak directly with the CEO. James couldn't hide his smirk. He's been quite insistent. I'm sure he has. I pulled out a small mirror, checking my appearance. Gone was the intentionally understated dress from last night. Today I wore a perfectly tailored Chanel suit, Louboutin heels, and the diamond earrings I'd bought myself after my first billion-dollar deal. How long has he been waiting? 20 minutes. He's mentioned his CFO title approximately 12 times. I took a slow sip of my coffee, premium Brazilian roast, not the cheap break room stuff Michael probably imagined I served. Let's make it 30. Sometimes a little humility is the best teacher. While I waited, I reviewed the final merger documents. The terms were brutal but fair. GlobalTech, the company Michael thought he was acquiring, was actually one of my shell corporations. Once the papers were signed, Harrison Industries would become a subsidiary of Phoenix Consulting Group. Michael wouldn't just be losing his CFO position. He'd be working for his little sister. At precisely 9 a.m. I gathered my files and headed to the conference room. Through the glass walls I could see Michael pacing, his perfect suit already showing signs of stress. Peter sat nearby, frantically flipping through legal documents, probably trying to figure out how they'd missed Phoenix Consulting Group's quiet acquisition of GlobalTech. I paused outside the door, remembering all the family dinners where they'd talked over me, all the snide comments about my career, all the times they'd made me feel small. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. The CEO will see you now, James announced, opening the door. Michael spun around, ready to unleash his executive authority. The words died on his lips as I walked in. Emma. Peter dropped his pen. What are you doing here? This is a private meeting. I walked calmly to the head of the table, setting my files down with practiced precision. Good morning, gentlemen. Shall we begin? Begin? Emma, you need to leave. This is an executive-level meeting. Michael's face had turned red. Go get your boss some coffee or whatever it is you do. I sat down, folding my hands on the table. I am the boss, Michael. Emma Phoenix, founder and CEO of Phoenix Consulting Group. But you know me better as just a secretary. The silence that followed was absolute. Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Peter had gone pale, probably remembering every condescending comment he'd ever made. This is impossible, Michael finally sputtered. You're lying. Where's the real CEO? I nodded to James, who started the presentation screens. My credentials, company ownership documents, and financial records filled the walls. 10 years of building an empire while my family thought I was fetching coffee. GlobalTech, the company you think you're merging with? I continued, enjoying the way Michael flinched at each word. I created it 3 years ago as a subsidiary. Harrison Industries isn't acquiring GlobalTech. Phoenix Consulting Group is acquiring Harrison Industries. Peter frantically flipped through his papers. But the board approved this merger. They approved a merger with GlobalTech, yes. Did anyone bother to check who actually owned GlobalTech? I pulled out the final contract. Your due diligence was sloppy, brothers. Perhaps because you were too busy mocking my career to pay attention to who was really pulling the strings. Michael stood up so quickly his chair toppled over. I'll fight this. The board won't stand for it. Dad won't. Dad's already signed off on it. I cut him off, sliding over another document. Our father's signature was at the bottom, dated 2 weeks ago. He just doesn't know it yet. You see, Phoenix Consulting Group has owned a controlling interest in Harrison Industries for months. We've been quietly buying shares through various shells while you were busy bragging at family dinners. Why? Peter's voice was barely a whisper. Why go to all this trouble? I leaned back in my chair, remembering every dismissive comment, every family gathering where they'd treated me like I was nothing. Because you needed to learn that titles don't define competence. That treating people as beneath you because of their job title says more about you than them. So what now? Michael had collapsed back into his chair, his arrogance deflated. You're firing us? No, I smiled. That would be too easy. You're both staying on with reduced roles and new supervisors. Young, ambitious people who started in support staff positions. People you would have dismissed as just secretaries. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. The merger papers need to be signed by noon. I suggest you take some time to read them carefully, especially the parts about your new positions. James will show you to a smaller conference room. I believe the coffee maker there is still working in case you need to practice your new skills. As I walked out, Peter called after me. Emma, wait. Does Mom know? Does anyone in the family know? I paused at the door. They will soon. I believe Mom's planning another family dinner this Sunday. I think I'll attend after all. I just bought a new dress for the occasion. From a department store, of course. The rest of the day passed in a blur of signatures and legal formalities. By 5 p.m., Harrison Industries was officially part of Phoenix Consulting Group. I sat in my office watching the sunset paint the city gold, when James brought in an urgent message. Your mother called the office directly, he said. Apparently your brothers missed the regular family dinner. She's quite concerned. I checked my watch, 7 p.m. Michael and Peter were probably still sitting in their offices, trying to process how their secretary sister had outmaneuvered them. Should I have told them? I wondered aloud. About all those nights taking MBA classes while they thought I was working late? About starting Phoenix from my tiny apartment, building it client by client while they mocked my little secretary job? James shook his head. They wouldn't have believed you anyway. Some people can only learn through experience. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. Emma dear, are you coming to Sunday dinner? Michael and Peter aren't answering their phones. Did something happen at work? I typed back, don't worry Mom. They're just adjusting to some corporate changes. And yes, I'll be there Sunday. In fact, I have some exciting news to share. Oh, wonderful, she replied immediately. Did you finally get a promotion? I smiled, looking around my corner office with its view of the city I'd quietly conquered. Something like that, Mom. Something like that. The next morning, the business papers announced the merger. Phoenix Consulting Group acquires Harrison Industries in surprise move. The article included a photo of me, Emma Phoenix, CO, signing the final papers. I had it framed and sent to my parents' house along with a note. Looking forward to Sunday dinner. Don't worry about the wine. I'll bring something from my private collection. After all, a secretary should know how to serve drinks. That Sunday I arrived at my parents' house exactly on time. Michael and Peter's cars were nowhere in sight. Probably still too embarrassed to face the family. Mom opened the door, her eyes wide as she took in my outfit. A designer suit that cost more than their monthly mortgage. Emma, she gasped. Is that you in the newspaper? The one about Phoenix Consulting Group. I handed her the bottle of wine. A rare vintage worth more than what they thought I made in a year. We have a lot to talk about, Mom. But first, I believe you owe your secretary daughter an apology. The look on her face was worth every moment of keeping my success secret. Sometimes the best revenge isn't serving it cold. It's serving it with a perfectly paired wine and watching your family realize that the person they underestimated now owns their entire world. As I took my seat at the dinner table, at the head where Michael usually sat, I couldn't help but smile. Success tastes sweetest when seasoned with justice, served with a side of humble pie, and garnished with the perfect amount of irony. So, I said, raising my glass. Who wants to hear about my little secretary job?